An explosive new report on the intel community and Russia. I'm Elaine Quijano, and this is Red and Blue. Ahead on the program, why President Trump's latest comments about immigration reform have some lawmakers and voters scratching their heads. And the president's on-again, off-again romance with Wall Street as stocks surged across 21,000 for the first time. But first, there is breaking news about the investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. This is the headline in the New York Times. Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. The report details efforts to disseminate information about possible contacts between associates of then-President-elect Trump and Russia. The goal was to leave a clear trail of evidence for future investigators after Mr. Obama left office. The Times also has new evidence of possible collusion in the election. Citing former intelligence officials, the article says American allies had proof of meetings in European cities between Mr. Trump's allies and Russian officials. The Times also reports that intercepted communications show that some Kremlin officials discussed contacts they'd had with Mr. Trump's associates. The House Intelligence Committee, which is investigating possible Russian meddling, took a key step forward in its probe Wednesday. Top members who'd been at odds over the scope of the inquiry agreed to investigate specifically whether there was any collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. This all comes as President Trump is getting strong reviews of his speech to a joint session of Congress Tuesday night. In our CBS News poll of Americans who watched his speech last night, 3 out of 4 say they approved of what they heard. And notably, more than half of Democrats describe Mr. Trump's address as presidential. Here are the key moments.
I believe that real and positive immigration reform is possible. If we are guided by the well-being of American citizens, then I believe Republicans and Democrats can work together to achieve an outcome that has eluded our country for decades. Obamacare is collapsing, and we must act decisively to protect all Americans. Action is not a choice, it is a necessity. So I am calling on all Democrats and Republicans in Congress to work with us to save Americans from this imploding Obamacare disaster. We should ensure that Americans with pre-existing conditions have access to coverage and that we have a stable transition for Americans currently enrolled in the health care exchanges. I am asking all members of Congress to join me in dreaming big and bold and daring things for our country. Think of the marvels we can achieve if we simply set free the dreams of our people. Cures to the illnesses that have always plagued us are not too much to hope. American footprints on distant worlds are not too big a dream. We just need the courage to share the dreams that fill our hearts.
One thing missing in the speech, details of a revised travel ban, which the White House said would come by the middle of this week. On Wednesday, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said of the ban, "When we have one, we'll announce it." For more on the president's speech and the breaking news about Russia, let's bring in our red and blue political panel. Zerlina Maxwell is a Democratic strategist and was director of progressive media for the Clinton campaign. She's here in New York. And Hogan Gidley is a Republican strategist and CBSN political contributor. He's with us from Columbia, South Carolina via Skype. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Let's start off with this New York Times reporting on Russia. And I'll start with you, Hogan, which is possible new evidence of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. Are there some limits to the White House strategy of essentially trashing reports like this as quote-unquote fake news?
Well, look, I mean, I think the Trump administration's vitriol toward the press has been evident from the get-go, even back during the campaign. They're going to continue to say things are fake, like this report, for example, until there's real evidence to show to the contrary. The Trump administration has been clear. Sean Spicer has been clear in all of his press briefings, pointing out that there was no conversations between anyone on the Trump campaign. People like Corey Lewandowski made the comment, there is no collusion, no conversations with Russia in the Trump campaign. So until there's something there, I think you're going to hear more of the criticisms from the Trump administration that this is more fake news from people like the New York Times.
Zerlina, what do you think?
I wish Hillary Clinton, was judged under those same rules, right? I mean, I think when you're talking about a double standard, this is an example that comes to mind, because it's not about whether there's there. We actually need to have an investigation to determine whether there's a there, and whether or not there were explicit communications between the Trump campaign and operatives in Russia, and in order to influence the outcome of the election. That is a critical component to this whole story, and something that we need to get to the bottom to, and we don't get to the bottom of it unless you actually do an investigation.
Yeah, Hogan, let me ask you a political question here. So you have the House Intelligence Committee, Hogan, investigating specifically now whether there was collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. What position do these kind of inquiries put top Republicans in on Capitol Hill as they work to reach out to President Trump over policy goals?
Well, I mean, it's a difficult situation if Republicans are ending up having to investigate a Republican president. But Congressman Nunes has been above board on all of this. He's been very clear. In fact, up a year ago, pointed out that the Russian hacks, the leaks going on, the conversations with Russia, that it was the biggest intelligence failure since 9/11, I believe he put it. And Republicans would be smart to understand that if there is something there, and if there is evidence that proves this, then we need to have that through an investigation. Of course, we need to have one. If there is that, then that's a conversation we need to have. But until then, it's just more noise, and it's just more things that take away from the Trump agenda, and that's what they're trying to avoid as an administration. You know, they've been criticized so much for going off on tangents that take them off a message and bringing up issues that prevent them from moving forward on the Trump agenda. Now they're actually focused on what they need to be focused on, which is governing, and these types of things are going to plague them until the investigation is complete and the facts come out.
And Zerlina, I mean, doesn't this in some sense kind of confirm the narrative for some people that, in fact, these are politically motivated attacks, that these leaks have been happening because of Obama administration holdovers who have made it their business to now try and bring down this president, or at least harm this president as he's in his first months in office? Doesn't this sort of confirm that narrative?
Not necessarily, because I think this is something that's really serious whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. The heart and integrity of our democracy is the ballot. People have died literally on bridges. Selma, the anniversary of the Bloody Sunday is coming up. You know, people died in order to be able to give all Americans the opportunity to access the ballot, and the integrity of that is at the core of our democracy. If we don't have an independent investigation, and this is another reason why I think any investigation needs to be handed off to a special prosecutor. You cannot let Jefferson Sessions, the Attorney General, investigate a campaign with which he was a very prominent surrogate.
Okay, and speaking of that, I was just handed, as you were talking, Zerlina, breaking news from the Washington Post, which is now reporting that Jeff Sessions spoke twice last year with the Russian ambassador, encounters that he did not disclose at his confirmation hearing to become Attorney General. Hogan, let me ask you, it seems now we are seeing, according to this report, more questions being raised, additional questions being raised now about someone who is now in the position to oversee investigations by the Justice Department here. What's your reaction to this news? I know it's obviously just happening, but back in his January confirmation hearing, then Senator Sessions said, quote, "I did not have communications with the Russians."
Right. Well, I mean, look, I haven't seen the report. Obviously, it was just handed to you, and it's breaking while we're on this this telecast here. But look, if he answered that way and it's incorrect, then we obviously need to have a serious conversation about that, because lying before Congress is a serious issue. But I don't know what was said. I don't know what the conversations were about. I don't know if, in fact, he had the conversation. So far, these are just assertions. So I don't know. This is the type of stuff that swarms around an administration that takes them off message. They're finally on message, so I can understand folks on the left trying to knock them back off and have to fight these types of petty spats. But these are serious charges and serious allegations. It's not so much the questions that concern me. Ask all the questions you want. It's the answers. If the answers are in the affirmative, there's a problem. If they're not, then we can move on to something else.
I should go on to note that the Washington Post article goes on to say that a spokeswoman for Sessions said there was, quote, absolutely nothing misleading about the answer that he gave back in that January confirmation hearing. Hogan, let me continue with you for just a moment here. Do you think, though, reports like this that are raising questions about communications possibly that may have happened will fuel calls for a special prosecutor to step in here? Because obviously, as I said, when in the Attorney General position, he is overseeing the very Justice Department that would be conducting this kind of investigation.
Sure, but I mean, this is what's going to happen now, from now until the end of Donald Trump's term as president. The left is going to try to attack him on every front. This story is not going away. As Republicans, when we were in control of the House and the Senate, as we still are, but when the Democrats had control of the White House with Barack Obama, we consistently went after him on things we thought were unethical, that were illegal. This is what happens. And now that Jeff Sessions is the head of justice, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But these are the fights. These are the issues that, if they are just purely political, they'll die and wither on the vine, and they'll end up on some weird blog and some conspiracy theory report somewhere that don't amount to anything. But if there's something there, I want to know about it. Let's get it out and let's figure out how to move forward. But right now, all it is speculation, and all it's doing is trying to take the administration off its game.
So as I'm looking at this Washington Post article further, Zerlina, the spokeswoman who is quoted here is Sarah Isker Flores, who's actually been on this show. And the statement from her to the Washington Post is that he was asked during the hearing, his confirmation hearing, about communications between Russia and the Trump campaign, not about meetings he took as a senator and a member of the Armed Services Committee. So I guess the question is, at a time when we have seen questions continuing to be raised about Russia, and the White House continuing to paint these as politically motivated attacks, for Democrats here, what is the strategy then? Is it to just kind of continue to make these calls and raise these questions, even though obviously, as you heard from Hogan there, the argument is these are just politically motivated and nothing more?
You know, this is politics, so there's always going to be, something political about these conversations. But again, I think when you're talking about a foreign government interfering in our election, I can't think of anything else that's more important to me as an American citizen and as a voter, someone who cares about the future of our country, and making sure that kids have access to education. All of these things we all care about, but we don't get there unless we have free and fair elections, that we can trust that when we go in to cast our ballot, that is accurately counted, and that there isn't a foreign government that is hostile to our own currently interfering in that outcome. And certainly when you have certain data points and facts, when you're looking at, Hillary Clinton won 3 million more votes in the popular vote, that is something that, with all of these other details coming out as we go into the new year, that's what raises flags, right? It's not as if there isn't other things that have already come out that isn't related to Russia that lead us to believe that we need to know more about what really happened.
Hogan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, but what is the assertion there? You just said that he impacted, that Russia could have impacted the outcome of the election. In what way?
Because it was a hacking and propaganda campaign. So if somebody is hacking into John Podesta's personal email messages and then posting 10,000 emails literally every day the last 30 days of the election, that is going to influence people's beliefs about what Hillary Clinton stands for, what she's going to do for the country, and it feeds into an already built narrative that she was corrupt. So it was part of a propaganda campaign to feed into a narrative that had already been created.
I think there are a lot of open questions right now, Hogan, still, but what we do know, our Margaret Brennan over the White House is confirming a report that Trump White House has confirmed to CBS that the president's aides were told this week by White House counsel to preserve emails and other materials that could be connected to various probes regarding Russian interference A White House official told her that this is, quote, simply taking proactive steps to push back against false and politically motivated attacks. So, Hogan, these developments are happening at a time when President Trump, as we just outlined and as we've been outlining all throughout the day, has been getting relatively high marks from people who watched his address on Tuesday, in which he wanted to focus on immigration. He wanted to focus on health care. He clearly wanted to strike a more unifying tone. And we didn't see a tweet barrage or anything else that might have perhaps gained some of the news spotlight. What does this news now do for a White House that seemed, you talked about a little bit off the top, but what does this do now for a White House that really was hoping to clearly focus attention on its agenda?
Well, news cycles rarely last more than a day anymore, so this isn't necessarily something that's going to take them off their game, and quite frankly, tomorrow it may be something else. This will be asked and answered, and we'll move on to something else. But you mentioned something at the top, which was that Donald Trump was able to deliver this speech that most everyone, Republicans and Democrats, basically graded as being very highly well-regarded, well-received, obviously well-delivered. And that was what he wanted to focus on today. He wanted to let that news permeate throughout America today, throughout the news cycle today. He did not step on it, as you mentioned, with tweets early this morning. He let this be the story. There was so much in that speech about what he wanted to do, and you touched on some of them, whether it be immigration reform, health care, building the wall, repealing, replacing Obamacare, as he put it, those types of things. This is just another issue that I believe we'll have to deal with, but I don't think it's going to snatch the spotlight unless there's some smoking gun there. Right now, after all the rhetoric soaring as it was leading up to the election and then afterwards, now we're focusing on governing. I think the American people are sick and tired of the nonsense. They want someone to step up there and get things accomplished. And remember, this whole movement is based on results. If there are no results, there is a likely chance that Donald Trump will not be reelected. But if these results begin to happen, these other ancillary issues, if there is nothing there, will not impact the news cycle whatsoever, and quite frankly, won't be anything more than a speed bump as Donald Trump continues to mow through his agenda. All
right, we will continue to watch it all closely. Zerlina Maxwell and Hogan Gidley, thank you both for your time.
Thanks.
Former Congressman Ryan Zinke is now in charge of 1/5 of the nation. He was sworn in as Interior Secretary Wednesday, hours after the Senate confirmed his nomination by a vote of 68 to 31. The position puts Zinke in control of 500 million acres of U.S. land, deciding how resources like coal are managed and which animals should be listed under the Endangered Species Act. Also Wednesday, Ben Carson inched closer to confirmation. The retired neurosurgeon and former Republican presidential candidate is President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The Senate voted to advance Carson's nomination by a vote of 62 to 37. A final vote on his nomination could take place Thursday. Coming up, President Trump outlined new priorities for immigration reform in his joint session speech. But one thing he didn't mention were possible plans for comprehensive legislation. Is such a bill in the cards? Plus, what did actual voters think of the president's joint session speech? Frank Luntz gets the no-holds-barred reaction. You're watching Red and Blue. President Trump tackled many topics in his speech to the joint session of Congress Tuesday night. One of those topics was a key tentpole of his campaign. Here's some of what he said about immigration.
At the same time, my administration has answered the pleas of the American people for immigration enforcement and border security. By finally enforcing our immigration laws, we will raise wages, help the unemployed, save billions and billions of dollars, and make our communities safer for everyone.
And President Trump's take on immigration is receiving positive feedback. A new CBS News poll showed more people favored the president's plans for illegal immigration after his speech than before. Mark Krikorian is the executive director for the Center for Immigration Studies, and he joins me now from Washington. Mark, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So your group says it has a pro-immigrant, low-immigration vision. Can you first of all just explain what that means?
Well, we try to make the case for fewer immigrants, but a warmer welcome for those immigrants that we do accept, helping them assimilate and Americanize, avoiding guest worker programs that really are exploitative of foreign workers. So it's, fewer workers, fewer immigrants, and a warmer welcome for those that we take in.
Let's turn to the president's remarks. He said that he believes that, quote, real and positive immigration reform is possible. I wonder, what is it that you hear in that statement?
I hear a politician saying something that everyone can interpret in any way they want. I mean, that wasn't a presentation of any kind of program, really. I think that was, in some sense, that was almost really filler. It was the specifics that he was talking about that I think are more relevant, about not just restoring enforcement for purposes of public safety and national security, but I think the key thing that he said, and you heard it in that clip, he talked about it some more later, was that better immigration enforcement and changes in legal immigration rules will be good for American workers, especially those who are less skilled and are competing in construction and other areas with a very high level of immigrant labor that we are importing now, legally and illegally.
I want to talk more about that in just a moment, but first I want to go back to the time ahead of his speech. The president told members of the media at a luncheon that, quote, the time is right for an immigration bill as long as there is compromise on both sides. There was much discussion about whether or not, before the speech, the president was signaling an openness to a path to legal status for undocumented immigrants with clean criminal records. No mention of it in the speech. What's your take on that?
Yeah, my sense is his talking about that before the speech to the media was kind of an off-the-cuff thing. I mean, I suspect somebody said, well, Mr. President, would you be open to such and such? And, he probably said, yeah, sure, maybe, that kind of thing. In other words, that wasn't anything specific. Unfortunately, a lot of the media ran with that, and they all got excited that this was some kind of change in policy. And in fact, it really wasn't.
Could that have been floating a trial balloon, though, Mark, you think?
Maybe. It's possible, but I think it's more likely that it was just him speaking off the cuff. He's done this kind of thing before. During the campaign, he was on the Hannity show, and it was a kind of a town hall format. And he said something similar, sounding, frankly, like Jeb Bush in some respects on immigration. But it was just him shooting from the hip. When he spoke formally a few days later, none of that stuff came up. So I honestly wouldn't read too much into this. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
I understand what you're saying, but I know you've written about this, and you've called it nonsense. Quote, the media hype about Trump possibly floating an amnesty plan was nonsense. That's a pretty forceful word, amnesty, and I wonder what your thought is, though, the fact that the president would even sort of mention it in an off-the-cuff way at all. Does that give you some pause?
No, not really, because, and maybe I'm a squish on this issue, but at some point, I think we are going to be amnestying some illegal immigrants.
Under the Trump administration?
Maybe even, it's possible. Probably, if it happens under the Trump administration, and it would be a kind of Nixon goes to China situation. People were talking about that yesterday with regard to Trump, promoting an amnesty. It's way premature to talk about this, but if there were a second term and he actually fulfilled a lot of his enforcement promises in the first term, maybe then, in 2021 or something, he would have the political capital and have changed the situation enough on the ground to be able to make that kind of proposal. Right now, it's premature to even talk about it, in my opinion.
Okay. The president also highlighted the creation of VOICE, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement Office. What do you know about that?
Well, it's a victim services office like almost all big city police departments have. A lot of federal government agencies, the Bureau of Indian Affairs has a victim services office. So it's actually kind of surprising that they haven't had one up to now. And really, that was one of the things that helped the president when he was a candidate politically, is that these family members of people who had been killed, not just by illegal immigrants, but by illegal immigrants that the government had in its custody and then let go, that no politician had ever sat down with those family members and just listened to their stories. No one had ever done it before Trump. Shame on them. And this is kind of an outgrowth of that. Several of the people in the gallery that he had invited. One of them was Jamil Shaw, whose son, Jamil Shaw III, I think was the son, was murdered by a gang member who was not just an illegal alien, but an illegal alien that LA police let go because of their sanctuary policy. That's the key. A regular illegal immigrant who we don't have any record of and happens to sneak into the country and kill somebody, that's bad, obviously. And the government has a kind of tenuous, indirect responsibility for that. But when they have an illegal immigrant in their hands, know he's an illegal immigrant, and then let him go instead of deporting him, the crimes that person commits really are the government's responsibility.
Well, this topic of immigration, certainly an emotional one for a lot of folks. Mark Krikorian, thanks very much for your perspective. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
President Trump is proposing to make the U.S. immigration system more merit-based. In his speech Tuesday night, he pointed to the Canadian and Australian systems, which do not follow the American tradition of family-based migration. A merit-based system allows countries to select immigrants who are likely to contribute economically and assimilate culturally. They often have advanced degrees, are fluent in the language, and are able to support themselves financially.
It's a basic principle that those seeking to enter a country ought to be able to support themselves financially. Yet in America, we do not enforce this rule, straining the very public resources that our poorest citizens rely upon. Our current immigration system costs American taxpayers many billions of dollars a year. Switching away from this current system of lower-skilled immigration and instead adopting a merit-based system, we will have so many more benefits. It will save countless dollars, raise workers' wages, and help struggling families, including immigrant families, enter the middle class. And they will do it quickly, and they will be very, very happy indeed.
CBS News contributor Frank Luntz watched the president's address with a panel of voters in California who quickly became fired up over the immigration issue. Take a listen.
There has to be a filter for the good immigrants and the immigrants that come here to sell drugs or to take advantage of the system.
Does Donald Trump offend you when he talks about this?
No, because I'm from Costa Rica, and even in Costa Rica, we have a big talk about illegal immigration, and we want also to secure our borders more. So it makes sense what he's saying here, because you have a big influx of people that come here just to take advantage.
You know, generally,
I appreciate because I'm Latin, that doesn't mean that I'm a criminal. And he's not. If I'm not a criminal, why would I include myself into that?
but to come in this country illegally, you are a criminal. Yeah. You have entered this country illegally. We have laws here. We have quotas in America. There is a quota for every country in this world on how many people can come into this country. And if you violate those quotas, you are breaking the law. Exactly. For the country you say you love, but why don't you come in here like everybody else? Did you come in here legally?
But most people don't come in.
Did you come in here legally?
Yes.
Yes. You should be ashamed of the individuals who get in here who don't come in here illegally.
Thank you.
I will say generally,
I
Mexico and Nigeria or anywhere else for that matter.
Generally, I did support the president's.
Come in just as a visiting. They don't cross over in the middle of nowhere. I appreciate that. That's fine. But it doesn't mean a wall is going to stop that. A wall is not going to stop people getting on an airplane.
One thing I generally
do you leave the doors open?
I do.
You see,
And nobody comes
you've
to
got to talk.
your house.
You've got to separate these issues. Here we talk about visa extension. Here we talk about, do we want a wall? Here, and then we're talking about 11 million people. What do we do with them? Yes, they came here illegally, but you know what? A lot of them. Let me just finish. A lot of them are being very, very productive in our society, and these are people who I want to be citizens. I want to live with them.
She said you're looking about jobs in the inner city, and it's a fact. If you work in the construction trades or in the service industry, illegals take those jobs away from people who need them.
You used to be a cop, correct?
Still am.
Still am. Does our immigration system, as it is now constructed, give you peace of mind, or does it give you anxiety?
No, it gives me anxiety.
Because?
We allow unfettered access across our borders, and it's not stopped. And when those people, when illegals cross into our country, they're breaking our laws. We are a country of laws. You see the peaceful transfer of power. That's what America is.
Will a wall make us safer?
It will slow us. It will slow it down significantly. We build walls because they work.
But the current wall is being.
He's a cop. He's a cop. This is his life on the line. Do you not think he makes a good argument?
I think he makes a good argument, but I think the change is going to happen with immigration reform. We have laws on the books already. We need to enforce it like any other country. I get that. But building a wall for billions and billions of dollars is not going to slow down the process, the immigration process.
Israel was getting a lot of deaths.
Okay, but we're not having a conversation about the Middle East. We're talking about 90 miles
is the wall.
from where we are right now, not 5,000 miles away. I want to focus on where we are right now.
I will tell you, I generally agree with his immigration, but one thing that did give me concern was him talking about shifting to a merit-based immigration system. American history is filled with stories of people who came here with nothing. They worked hard, and they contributed, and they made something out of themselves. So that's one part I would disagree with.
Yeah, and look at our ancestors or people who came here as immigrants from Ellis Island and started out like a melting pot and really wanted the American dream.
Legal immigration.
And, well, okay, but I still think
My parents
should be a
wouldn't have been
melting
here.
pot.
Neither would Donald Trump's parents. While you're playing.
What is the moral message of a wall?
I mean, the thing is, I'm not saying that there doesn't need to be a wall. There are other priorities. You telling me you can get so upset about there not being a wall, but a child in Flint, Michigan does not have clean drinking water.
And if someone is the victim, as he showed right there, that family was a victim of illegal immigration, you don't think that matters?
I think it matters. I do think it matters. I also think homegrown terrorism matters. I didn't see any of the family from the Charleston massacre. I didn't see any of those people, okay? So I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. I don't agree with we need to build a wall right now. We don't have clean drinking water.
There's one more aspect of this that is relevant, which is you've got a travel ban now from 6 countries in the Middle East.
Muslim ban.
Do you support that ban or not?
Yes.
Who supports it? Raise your hands. Who opposes it? Raise your hands. Once again, we're split. What's interesting is that the media was very critical of Trump for doing it, and yet every poll shows support for it. Why is that? Don't call it a ban. Call it extreme vetting. Then people would feel a lot more comfortable.
Even if it's
So you think it's language? I do. I absolutely do.
Even if it's extreme vetting, the fact that he chose those 7 countries, we all know he said, oh, well, Obama said this. Well, those countries that you chose are not even the countries where the terrorists came from.
No.
Go ahead. Hold on.
Yes, they
Go
are.
ahead.
Those 7 countries are where the terrorists are originated from, and they
No, that's
yes, they are.
That's not true.
Why do you think that?
He made a list of 70 that came from those countries.
Why did he
One at a
choose
time.
those 7
Because
countries?
those are the ones that the
Why didn't you choose Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia is
And
responsible
those-
for September 11th.
But
They have
they're
a
just
working
they're
government
just as
that
much
can
of a
vet.
Muslim country.
Stop. What is it about this issue?
Because it's against a religion.
It is
It's
not.
against
There's more religions.
not.
There's
It's
more
Islam. It's
Muslims
a
in
Muslim
other
ban.
countries than
It's
just
a
those 7 countries.
Look at this.
But why didn't he ban the
Stop.
countries where he has interest? How about that?
Right.
Why can we not have a civilized conversation about immigration and not tearing each other apart?
You can't have a civilized conversation in this country about anything anymore. Civility's out the window.
And you know what? And
We're not calling each other names. This is a civilized conversation.
You have
we're getting loud.
Then your
but we're not
definition of civilized is a lot different than mine.
Everyone is. We have strong feelings.
So what if everyone's got strong feelings? I got strong feelings.
But strong feelings don't make us uncivilized.
Well, they can't be heard because you're all talking at the same time.
Up next, we'll take a look at the headlines that will give you a head start for Thursday, including a new report about funding for President Trump's proposed border wall. Plus, as the Dow reaches record highs, the Trump administration rolls back regulations on Wall Street. But the president wasn't always so in favor of helping the banking industry. You're watching Red and Blue. Here's a look at some of the headlines we'll be talking about on Thursday. The Wall Street Journal reports the White House may change its strategy for countering North Korea. An internal review reportedly includes the possibility of military force or regime change to halt the country's nuclear weapons threat. North Korea launched a ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan last month. And Reuters reports the Trump administration may have to wait a while to build a border wall. Last month, the White House said construction of a wall would be paid for with existing funds. But so far, the Department of Homeland Security reportedly has only found $20 million in usable money for the multi-billion-dollar project. And USA Today reports Senator Lindsey Graham has a plan to get the president to release his tax returns. He wants to make it a law that all presidential candidates in 2020 have to release them. President Trump has refused to release his federal returns, despite decades of precedent. Last month, President Trump signed an executive order for the Treasury Department to review banking regulations implemented after the 2008 financial crisis. The president made very little reference to this in his first major address to a joint session of Congress on Tuesday, but in the past has said that he wants to, quote, do a big number on the financial reform legislation known as Dodd-Frank, which he has also called a disaster. William Cohan is author of the book Why Wall Street Matters and a special correspondent for Vanity Fair. He worked on Wall Street for 17 years, and he actually agrees with the president on this point. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So you say that Washington's regulation of Wall Street has gone too far, and you write this in your book, quote, instead of facilitating the recovery of Main Street, Washington's policies have been thwarting it. Enough is enough. The ongoing vilification of Wall Street and the entire financial system has to stop. But as you well know, there were a lot of people who suffered in the aftermath of the Great Recession. And some folks are going to look askance at that and say, doesn't quite jive with what my gut is telling me happened at that time. So what, in your view, has been wrong with the government's response?
So, as you said, I was a banker on Wall Street for 17 years. I've spent the last 13 years writing about Wall Street. I've written 3 other books about Wall Street. I've been very critical of Wall Street's behavior in 2007 and 2008, and I firmly believe that Wall Street should have been prosecuted for that bad behavior. But for whatever reason, which is still a mystery, the Justice Department did not do that. So into that vacuum, unfortunately, fell congressional leaders and regulators who decided that they would be the ones to punish Wall Street by making it harder for Wall Street to do what it does best, which is provide capital to those people who need it by taking it from those people who have it and want to invest it. It's a very simple formula. It's a beautiful machine. It's worked well in this country for 150 years. But unfortunately, in my view, the regulations of Wall Street in the aftermath of the financial crisis swung too far, too critically, and made it very difficult for Wall Street to do what it does best.
But what are you specifically talking about here? Are you saying that we should go back to pre-2008 policies?
No. We saw what happened when we had no regulation. I'm talking about smart regulation. There's a lot of things in Dodd-Frank that are actually good, that we should keep. like rules about amount of capital that banks have to have, the amount of leverage they can have, trading of obscure securities like derivatives on exchanges. Even the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau, I think, is a very good thing. I mean, somebody should be looking out for consumers when it comes to things like mortgages and other financial instruments. But unfortunately, the regulators, especially at the Fed and in Dodd-Frank, which was 850 pages long, 20,000 pages of additional regulations and rules, was make it very hard for banks to do what they do best, which is lend money to new businesses that need it, starting businesses that need it, established businesses that need it, and to help them grow. And you have to be able to be willing to take risk to do that. If you make a loan to somebody, that means you have a lot of faith that you're going to get paid back. And basically, the Federal Reserve and Congress has made it much more difficult for Wall Street to do that, which is essential to job creation, wealth creation, innovation. And so we need to allow Wall Street to do that.
So you also write that most Americans don't really understand what Wall Street does. Right. What are some of the biggest misconceptions out there? I mean, you know the stereotypes that exist. That
of course I do.
Just greedy, that are in that for themselves, don't care about the little guy.
Look, it's a little difficult for me to be put into a position of defending Wall Street's behavior because it's a very unpopular thing to do. But I wrote this book because I wanted people to understand the, quote, mystery that is Wall Street. Because how can you have a rational debate about it? How can you have a fact-based debate about Wall Street if you don't understand it? And most people, at some point, they get to their point in their life, they don't want to admit that they don't understand Wall Street. But, you know, if they have a pickup truck, if they have a widescreen TV, if they have an iPhone, if they have a mortgage, then they have to know about Wall Street. So in simple, clear terms, I wrote this book so people who, you know, as Gayle King said yesterday, you can put this in your pocketbook. So people who want to know about Wall Street but are kind of too afraid to ask can read this, have an understanding about it, and join the debate about what Wall Street should be. In the, you know, now that Donald Trump is, as you said, about to change all the rules.
Yeah, so, you know, during the campaign, he slammed repeatedly Wall Street, of course, but now seems to be sort of changing his tone a bit here. What do you think the chances are of him essentially playing negotiator-in-chief between Wall Street and the American people?
So one of the things that I think is really important here is that Wall Street just not be given carte blanche again as they were in 2006 and 2007 when all the rules of the road came off. And we saw that was like Wall Street getting in a Ferrari and driving on the wrong side of the road with a whiskey bottle in their hand. So my feeling is that that Donald Trump, Mr. Dealmaker-in-Chief, our famous best dealmaker of all time, should basically say to Wall Street, look, you want some of these regulations to come off? You want to be able to get the beautiful machine that is Wall Street working again? You have to make some serious changes in the way you compensate people who work on Wall Street, the way you incentivize people who work on Wall Street. And instead of rewarding them for taking big risks with other people's money, you reward them as if they were taking risks with their own money and have a higher degree of accountability than we've had in close to 50 years on Wall Street. And that, if I were Donald Trump, that would be the negotiation, the sort of grand bargain that I would demand of Wall Street.
It's a tough ask.
It's a tough ask, but it's not an unreasonable ask. Otherwise, they're just going to give them carte blanche for nothing in return. And by the way, this is the way Wall Street used to be when it was a series of private partnerships, when partners had their own capital on the line. So it's in their DNA. They understand what I'm saying. It's not a big ask. They should do it. Real leaders on Wall Street would step up and say, I want to do this. They should volunteer to Donald Trump. Now, maybe I'm smoking something, but the truth is that responsible Americans who work on Wall Street should want the American people to know that they have their best interests at heart.
Last question for you. We only have about a minute left. The president has touted the success of Wall Street since he's taken office. Do you think that's something that he can actually take credit for?
You mean the increase in the stock market? Mm-hmm. Well, I think actually that's one of the few things that he can actually.
Confidence is back.
Animal spirits are back. Confidence is back. People are confident that his policies will result in higher corporate profits. But it's really important to note that as the stock market now trades through 21,000 today, which is mind-blowing, after being stuck at around 17,000 until the election, the bond market has gone in the opposite direction. Yields have risen, bond prices have fallen, and that bond market is twice the size of the stock market. We should be heeding what the bond market is telling us about the potential higher deficits that are going to exist under Trump and the higher national debt that might exist under Trump.
All right, fascinating topic. William Cohan, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Some voters never thought they'd hear the words President Donald Trump, and now it seems President Oprah Winfrey may not be entirely out of the question. In an interview with David Rubenstein for his Bloomberg television show, Winfrey said Mr. Trump's victory has her rethinking whether she could be elected to lead the White House.
Have you ever thought that given the popularity you have, we haven't broken the glass ceiling yet for women, that you could actually run for president and actually be elected?
I actually never thought that was, I never considered the question even a possibility. I just thought, oh.
Right, because it's clear that you don't need government experience to be elected president of the United States, right?
I thought, oh, gee, I don't have the experience. I don't know enough. I don't know. And now I'm thinking, oh.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay.
The interview was taped December 12th, but aired this week in the season premiere of The David Rubenstein Show. We should note Winfrey is a Hillary Clinton supporter and was recently named special contributor to CBS News' 60 Minutes. Time now for your moment of levity here on Red and Blue. Immediately after President Trump's speech to Congress Tuesday night, comedian Stephen Colbert took to the Late Show stage to analyze the president's address. He used his monologue to run through some of the speech's key moments. Here are his sharpest jabs.
And as he was leaving the White House, cameras caught President Trump apparently rehearsing his lines in the back of the limo. Now, obviously, CNN's powerful microphones picked up what he was saying. I'll have the clams casino, and I'll have a side of steak, and the lady will have a Coke, no ice, and I'll have her steak, please. Of course, it's a really big night, and some in Congress dressed for the occasion. The female members of the House Democratic Caucus all wore white in honor of women's suffrage, while, very nice, they wore white, while the Republicans were white in honor of who elected them. Then, at long last, the big moment came.
The President of the United States.
Any chance there's a mistake and Moonlight is the president? Is there just... Of course, Trump immediately boasted about his executive orders.
We have placed a hiring freeze on non-military and non-essential federal workers.
Non-essential federal workers. So Kellyanne Conway is out? Is she just gone? And finally, Trump got to the long-awaited moment.
Tonight, I am also calling on this Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare.
I gotta say, that must have been hard on Trump. People got so excited just hearing Obama's name. Of course, his goal is to make America great again. And for everybody wondering, the time Trump thinks America was great, well, he gave his answer. The 1886 World's Fair.
Alexander Graham Bell displayed his telephone for the first time. Remington unveiled the first typewriter. An early attempt was made at electric light. Thomas Edison showed an automatic telegraph and an electric pen. Imagine the wonders our country could know in America's 250th year.
Who knows, maybe a cordless pen? As we come to the end of tonight's address to Congress, I think we can all agree on one thing. 1 down, 7 to go.
After the break, I'll get you caught up on the rest of the day's news, including the latest on Snapchat's plans to go public, why the social media upstart's new IPO has tongues wagging on Wall Street. We'll see you back here again on Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. You're watching CBSN.